What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we're diving into our first rookie draft of the season, 2024 mock, where we're going to get through at least 2 rounds. First round here on YouTube, we're going to have a lot of fun with this, and we're going to start with the top tier. We're just going to look and go through there, and again, just so everybody knows, we don't have all the declarations. We don't know everybody that's coming out. So this is just a fun experiment and to kind of get you guys aware of some of the best players that were in college football. We know most of them. We don't know all. So as that information goes, we'll definitely tell you on the show. We'll definitely do kind of like a little segment. Hey, these guys also declared. This is where we plug them in. And we're going to be talking about these guys for the next 4 months. So we're excited about that. We're finally bringing you some rookie content. So we'll get in there. Jeff Bell got the 101 because he's the oldest on the show. So we always, adhere to our seniors. So Jeff, Superflex, tight end premium, where are you going with the 101?
I think right now you have to go with Caleb Williams. It seems the conversation is around him. He's been our top player on our boards for over a year, and so you've got to go there still. There's no reason not to go that direction. Whether or not he ends up in Chicago right now seems to be the big open question. I think the Commanders would love to get aggressive and move up to the 101, given his local ties to the area, given Josh Harris wanting to come in as a new owner and make a splash. That's kind of where my mind is sitting right now if he's not going to be a Chicago Bear. But I do think Caleb Williams has to be the top pick in Superflex. I think there are scenarios that could open it up that as we get closer to the draft, and if we see some things happen in the draft, I don't know that it's cemented in as much as maybe we've thought for the past year. But right now, you've got to go that way.
Yeah, Caleb is still the highest graded quarterback that I've scouted in the last half decade. So I know a lot of people are knocking him for various things. We'll get into a lot of detailed scouting reports on this show. Caleb has issues fumbling. He has issues holding the ball a little bit too long. But there's a lot of context to that. And I do think that if you get Caleb behind a halfway decent offensive line with at least one weapon, we're talking about maybe a top 12 dynasty performer as a rookie. And so I think that's the clear pick at 101 still, though. I think this is a tier. I think the 102 is definitely in that conversation at times as well.
Yeah, and for context for where Caleb's going right now, in a lot of startup drafts that I've seen, and real ones, because there's degenerates out there that are already in those, and then there's also mocks out there, Caleb's essentially QB5 to QB8 right now. He's getting drafted in that area with all the guys right after the Stroud tier. So that's kind of where his value's at. If he's getting value like that already, yeah, he's the 101 in Superflex. And again, remember, these guys hold their value pretty much. Like Bryce will still hold his value in that round 2-ish area there. So if you're drafting him in that area, I get it. I had the 102 because I'm the second oldest, and I went Marvin Harrison Jr. I grabbed, Ohio State wide receiver. To me, I think that there is a realistic. I've gotten a lot of questions about this. I hold the 101, but I have Kyler Murray and Trevor Lawrence and Anthony Richardson. What do I do? And to me, like Marvin Harrison Jr. is in the tier where you would probably take him if you can't move back one spot at the 101. He's coming in as wide receiver 3-4 in Dynasty right now. That's where he's getting valued. I like most of the landing spots at the top half of that draft. Like if he goes to Arizona, I like that spot for him with what we saw with DeAndre Hopkins with Kyler Murray in that offense being the number one guy. I like that. I even like to go to the Bears, in my opinion, if that's kind of how they go there. He is in a tier of 101, 102. This is the tier. This is the top 2 tiers. If you're trading for these picks, you should realistically expect one of these 2 guys. Now, I don't do that for every draft pick in the first round, but Marvin Harrison Jr. stands out to me. He's the complete package. He's gotten better. I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet either. People realize that he came in like 30 pounds underweight as a freshman. He gained like 25 pounds of muscle. Dude was stacked, had a good couple years, but I don't think we've hit a ceiling yet. I think he still is growing as a prospect. He's got the bloodlines. Like 102 is pretty easy for me to smash Marvin Harrison Jr. I know there's been some naysayers out there with Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you see that at all, Jeff?
Not personally. I don't see any red flags in that regard. I think that he's coming in as a very polished receiver. I mean, he looks like his dad is one of the most technically refined receivers in NFL history, to be honest with you, given his age. You mentioned the weight. Yeah, he completely transformed his body while at college. He got bigger, stronger, faster and while at college. And that's what you want to see. He's taken on every challenge in front of him. I think he's exceptional at playing the ball in the air down the field. I think he's exceptional at getting open downfield, beating defensive backs there. We've seen body control on the sideline. He has made there have been so many plays, and being an Ohio State fan, I've had the pleasure of watching him up close for the last couple of years. there's been multiple plays on his tape where you see the ball and you've seen so much football that you think, well, that's just an incomplete pass. And then you realize he got his toe down and I don't know how he did that, or got a different body part down and I don't understand how he did that. And that anytime that you've got a receiver like that is doing things that you're like, I don't know how he did that. Especially I think pushes him. I'm fine with him being here. I do want to touch on that scenario that you talked about. And Kyler Murray, I do think that he would be a player that would be there quite often because he missed half the year. Mm-hmm. But I think that this is a scenario where if you've earned the 101 and you're sitting there with 3 strong quarterbacks in Superflex, I would look to move off of. Probably Murray would be the primary one to move off of and go ahead and double up Caleb Williams with Richardson and with Lawrence instead of going to the wide receiver. Personally, those values should be there in Superflex for especially a player like Kyler Murray. I think he's ending the season stronger than where he was a couple weeks ago. So his value should bounce back pretty quickly once we get into startups and clear of that disappointment of missing him half the year.
Yeah, we'll get into this next tier as well. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr., like Kevin said, I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet. I think one thing that he has working for him, and something I've talked about on the show, is because he was so undersized, he had to win with footwork and speed and, getting open. And so now that he's big, he can still do all of those things. And that's, what you want in a top 5 to, I think we're going to see some course correction where CeeDee Lamb is very clearly ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. in Dynasty as when Marvin's a rookie. But I also think that there's a world in which he's regarded as a top 3 to 5 asset immediately. So the quarterbacks that are there, I understand going that route, especially in Superflex, but Marvin Harrison is too talented for me to pass him up at 102.
It just depends on your league too. Like if you're sitting there and it really depends on how active they are. If they're not moving back, if they're not kind of going there, I don't want to move outside of any tier where I can't get Marvin Harrison Jr. if I'm sitting there with those quarterbacks. Like, so if worst comes to worst, I'll draft the best player, let the chips fall and go there. And like what Christian's talking about, if you want to see footwork from his freshman year, you go watch the Utah game in the Rose Bowl. That is the game when you watch Marvin Harrison Jr. Then he just got better. And it was like a rocket ship going there. So that is a lot of fun there. And like Jeff said, just bigger, better, faster in college. He had the opposite experience of my college experience. But that's not what we're going to talk about here. But that's our first tier there. Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. To me, that is the tier. But that's been the tier for us. If you read my big board, like really in reality, like that we've all kind of known that, and your league mates know that too. So also just know that going into it. But before we move on to the next part of this rookie mock, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with any questions, trades, or any thoughts on these rookies as we dive into them.
Also, be sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a premium subscriber. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty content, IDP, salary cap, and best ball content for less than $70 annually. Head to footballguys.com/plans to join today. We do plan on feeding you Dynasty content all off season long. It's a very big priority and mission here at Football Guys, and we appreciate you being out there and being listeners, subscribers, and we would love to give you whatever you need.
All right, Christian. 103. Where are you going?
So I've done this before. We did a 24 and 2023 mock a few weeks ago. I'm taking Jayden Daniels, the quarterback from LSU, and I think that Jayden Daniels is close enough to Drake Maye that I'm comfortable with Jayden Daniels' fantasy football ceiling as a running quarterback. Now, I do think that Jayden Daniels is a step below Drake Maye as a passer. I think Jayden Daniels has a beautiful deep ball. I think that he is risk averse and that he doesn't put the ball into harm's way too often. But there are certainly some things on his film that I say, okay, he's not going to be an immediate, 3,500 yard, 1,000 yard, 3,500 yard passing yards, and then 1,000 yards rushing probably. But I still think he's going to score a lot of fantasy points. And so when we're talking about that grouping of them, there have been some rumblings that some NFL teams are more interested in Jayden Daniels than they are Drake Maye. And so I think it's worth noting that Jayden Daniels is looking like a locked-in top 10 pick. And if he gets that draft capital, it's really tough to pass on his rushing upside here at 103.
You've been charting quarterbacks, all college quarterbacks all this year. How do you see him playing immediately? Because to me, the athleticism certainly is going to translate. What we've seen him do, especially in the SEC, is going to translate. And so is this, I mean, not player wise, but numbers wise, is Justin Fields, do you think, is an apt comparison for numbers wise, not player numbers wise, not player wise? I want to make sure to reiterate that for everybody out there. But when you look at on a piece of paper, I think that that seems to me to be realistic, kind of where he's going to be a baseline early, at least.
I think so, because I think a lot of his fantasy production is gonna be based on that running floor. So Jayden Daniels struggles to me in seeing the full field. I think he's really good at identifying when things break open. So a Jayden Daniels with an Arthur Smith, where he is scheming guys open, and he might not have the quarterback to do those things. That's intriguing to me. A creative offensive coordinator that is really good at scheming guys open. I think Jayden Daniels is going to be fine as a passer. But if he has to go through full field reads and kind of work back to his backside progressions and things like that, that's where I don't see him getting all the way through those progressions before he takes off and runs, which kind of excites me for fantasy.
Yeah, the thing with Jayden, and this is where I've been back and forth with him, because I think he's gonna get like killed if he runs a lot. Like I worry about that. However,
Yeah.
if he can learn how like Lamar's done this year, and that's taken Lamar a lot of time, but Lamar doesn't run at 100% anymore. He's like at 85%. He protects his body, does a really good job there. Like those are the guys that Jayden should be looking at, like Tua learning how to fall, like little things like that. I think if Jayden does that and progresses, that's good. The other thing about Jayden that he's improved on, his deep ball is fantastic. Like fantastic. People talk about Michael Penix Jr.'s deep ball. Jayden was absolutely crushing it this year. Like over deep passes, I'm pretty sure he was 33 for 51 in November, 64% completion percentage. Like, and that just went up. Like, and when you're looking at big time throws, over 30 this year according to PFF. Like when you're looking at his NFL passer rating, it would be one of the best in college football. So the thing with Jayden, like I think we see the rushing upside. That's great. He's improved as a passer too. I mean, he should. He's been in college for a while, but he's improved, and that's what you really like. You see in there. I don't think this is a hot take. I think that Jayden and Drake are going to be interchangeable. I think it's going to depend kind of like how they get drafted, where they go, and who do you believe in more. But from a fantasy perspective, of course, Jayden's going to have the upside because his rushing ability. And that's perfectly fine. I think that's a perfectly good argument there. I'm fascinated to see where they get drafted, though. Fascinated. And don't you dare say Arthur Smith's going to be back. We do not want Arthur Smith out there. What's going on, Jeff?
I was going to address that and say this episode will be airing after Black Monday, and we choose to live in a post Arthur Smith world on this episode, so we'll go ahead and put that out in the universe. But I do think that I mean, maybe it is a hot take. I expect that the tier of 2 at the top to expanded to 3 once we really get into it, once we really start to hear feedback on Daniels, and I do expect a little bit of separation between him and Drake Maye if we get that feedback that he is going to be a top 5-ish guy.
All right, go to 104. Where are you going, Jeff?
Drake Maye. I think you have to. It's hard not to go to Drake Maye at this position, and I do think Malik Nabers probably creates an interesting conversation. But I mean, Drake Maye, every single indication that we have right now is he is going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. He's got the athleticism. I think that Justin Herbert is an apt comparison for him in some regards. I think there's functional athleticism. I don't know how much of that's going to translate to rushing production for fantasy, but the ability to move around and be able to attack the field vertically, those types of things, build size-wise, those types of things I think are there on Drake Maye. So I think you have to take him at the 104. It's just there's too much stealing there, and especially everything that we're hearing early about potential draft position.
So I want to address Drake Maye's rushing ceiling, because I think that's going to be a hot topic as we get through, more evaluations and more people get eyes on him. So he was involved in the North Carolina running attack. They would do QB draws. They would get him out in space, and I think that he does move fairly well. With that being said, I think like a Patrick Mahomes-esque rushing ceiling is what you can hope for, just grabbing 10 yards on a scramble or something like that. I don't think that you involve him in like RPO stuff, read option, where he's just he has the option to pull the ball. I don't think that's part of Drake Maye's game, because that's not his best attribute. His best attribute is his big arm, And so I think when we start to talk about Daniels versus Maye, there will be some people who say, well, Maye can run the ball too. He can, but it's not even remotely close to what Jayden Daniels can do. And I think that's what separates the two, specifically for me at this 103, 104 kind of separation here.
I think what I have flashbacks from Sam Howell could run. Remember that dual threat Sam Howell talk that we had for a while, and it's the same offense, kind of. I mean, they have a different offense coordinator, but same kind of when you're looking at it. So yeah, you're right about the rushing thing. I think from Drake, as a quarterback, I think I think he has good anticipation. I think he can read defenses pretty well. I think, overall, like he had some mistakes this year, but I think it was more hero ball because his team needed it. So when you watch him play, like he had to go kind of take those risks there. I think he navigates the pocket really well. I think the thing with Drake, like when he's playing, he navigates the pocket really well, knows where he needs to get the football and very good there. Like he has the upside at all those things. My biggest concern with Drake is that his footwork and his mechanics are not the best. And they haven't improved this year. I haven't seen improvement. I know Christian's talked about him over the summer, and like I've been watching it and watching the tape, and I know he's been doing his breakdowns. I don't know. I don't see that improvement. He needs to improve that. Like, so if we're going to nitpick on different things, like he's still a top 5 pick in terms of this draft, that's fine. But he definitely needs to improve his mechanics. I think that there is something there. And so when he gets drafted, where he gets drafted to, do they have a good offensive line? Because if they don't have a good offensive line, I think Drake could maybe struggle that first year. I think there could be some interceptions, stuff like that. And there's not very good offensive lines in the top 10 picks of the NFL draft either. So I think that's something to look at with Drake. As a quarterback, yeah, he's just fine. I'm not going Justin Herbert takes yet. But yeah, he'll do just fine in there. I think he's being forgotten about in this class too. I think everybody likes Jayden and Michael Penix and all those guys, but Drake Maye is a very solid pick there. Any final thoughts on that one, Jeff?
I do not think he is Justin Herbert. I think there are elements there.
You said it. I didn't say it. I didn't put it out there.
I just want it to be very clear. And we're talking right now. I'm leaning a little bit more talking about what you might see on paper in terms of that's kind of where right now.
Are you spreadsheeting me right now? Is this what's happening? Is Jeff Bell becoming a spreadsheet guy? Look at that.
I'm just looking at measurables and things that are.
Okay. All right. My bad. Wrong spreadsheet. I like those spreadsheets. All right. 105. I'm going to take Malik Nabers from LSU. And I think at 105, it's a steal. I think that he has really good versatility in alignment. I think he can line up inside out, big playability. I mean, if Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't in this draft, Malik Nabers would probably go 102, in my opinion. I think he could be that good. Really good route runner. Physical after the catch, ability to kind of break those things. We've talked about Nabers before, when we dived into him preseason, and we talked about like, hey, I think that he has a chance to really compete with Marvin Harrison Jr. his first year in fantasy production, depending on the landing spot where he goes. He's a he's a complete package wide receiver. I do think, if we're gonna like talk about nitpicking a little bit, I don't know, separate on vertical routes, maybe he's not going to be his thing. I think he's a really good route runner. Can he take off the top of the defense all the time? I don't know about that. But overall, really complete package here. To me, this is 105 would be a smash where he's going at. And this is kind of that tier 2 where you like to get into. I want to get into that first 5 picks so I can get a pick with one of these guys in here.
Yeah. So I guess one of my hot takes as I continue to watch Nabers is that there's a little bit of Antonio Brown to his game. I think you're going to see some DJ Moore comparisons, but I don't know that I've seen a prospect as fluid with as much acceleration in my many years of doing this. I wasn't putting grades on Antonio Brown back in the day. But I do think that there's something to be noted about how there's one play that you're going to see a lot, probably if you're on social media, where he catches the ball on the right hash and he's facing the quarterback. He turns and runs all the way to the other sideline, and he is able to outrun every single player on the field. And that's rare athleticism, rare yards after the catch ability. To me, I think I can make a case for him being 103. I seriously considered it over the 2 quarterbacks. And that's something that, based on team construction, I would be comfortable with Nabers being ahead of those 2 guys. So I know that's getting into, and I think as we get into the 106, I think you can maybe make that case for him, but I'm more comfortable with Nabers being close to Marvin Harrison Jr. in that same tier than I am the next guy being in Nabers' tier.
Yeah.
I think production-wise, I mean, Nabers could easily outproduce Marvin Harrison Jr. for fantasy purposes, especially in PPR formats. What would you guys need to tear down from Harrison Jr. to step into Malik Nabers here?
If the guy knows I'm like Marvin Harrison Jr. is on a clock, I need a 25 first. That's what I would take because I want Marvin Harrison Jr. But if you can give me a 25 first on top of that, I'll tear down on Malik Nabers.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's about where I'm comfortable, but also I think I'm being greedy asking for a first because of how highly I think of Nabers. So,
well, but I think that in less plugged in leagues, I think that there is an opinion out there that Harrison is well above Nabers.
Yeah. But we've seen this before, though, right? Like this last year, we were sitting here doing this show talking about Jackson Smith-Njigba, and now look at Puka Nacua and Tank Dell, and we're just like, oh, okay. Like we've seen it before. I think speaking in less absolutes is important. But if I can tear down to get to Nabers, yeah, I'm gonna be greedy though because I'm like, hey, Marvin Harrison Jr. He's that dude. I'm just gonna keep putting that in the chat. He's that dude, and then hey, come get him, right? And then you try to extract as much value as you can. All right, 106. Where are you going, Christian?
Rome Odunze. This episode is coming out right after the national championship game. I don't know how he played. I don't know if he did well yet because we're recording this a little early, as Jeff said earlier. But Rome Odunze is one of those players that he does everything well. He got extremely good at contested catches. He is one of those guys who flashes late hands, so he makes the defensive back's life extremely hard. He's a good route runner, maybe not an elite route runner. He's kind of underrated after the catch. He's one of these guys that profiles as one of those true wide receiver 1 types. I think he's locked in to be a top 12 to 15 pick. I know one of the comps that I saw that I really like, and I apologize, I don't remember who had it. If you guys remember, feel free to chime in. But DeAndre Hopkins is a decent comparison for Odunze, except I think he might have more juice than DeAndre did as a prospect. And so when we're talking about what upside is and maybe what usage might look like, that's something I'm intrigued by. This is the wide receiver tier, though. These three are head and shoulders above the next group. And this wide receiver class is crazy good, and I love all of them. But these three are the ones that I really, really want on my dynasty rosters.
I've been on Odunze for a while, and you guys know that. And I said even over a month ago that I expect him to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. I've seen maybe some numbers knocks on him, but I think that it's important that people understand some context. And his 2020, his freshman year was the COVID year, and the Pac-12 was a mess. He actually was on a team with Puka Nacua at Washington that year. Then the last 2 years, Jalen Polk, and he's had Jalen McMillan. They've had a ton of NFL level talent at wide receiver. And so he's had a later breakout, but there are reasons to that. And we've seen a coaching change in Washington was part of it as well. And so I think that there are adding context and painting with a broad brush and saying, well, he's a late breakout, he didn't do anything his freshman year, I think is a dangerous territory in general, not understanding that context. But for Odunze in particular, his game just translates so well to the NFL. And I think that, you talk about the explosion. This is going to be the show that gets Jeff in trouble with comps. This is not a comp. But I said in our chat that I think there are a little bit of Jamar Chase elements in Odunze's game, given the physicality, the explosion that he has, the ability to work intermediate, the ability to work still and win downfield.
Yeah, I like Odunze. I want everybody to know I like Odunze so his dad doesn't come after me on social media. He's out there. He's fine. Your post out there. Yeah, he's fine. I still think Nabers and Harrison, though, I have him ahead of Odunze, though. So, yeah. And I think Rome's one of those guys that, like, depending on the draft, you might be able to get him a little later. It kind of just depends. It kind of depends, like, what kind of league mates you have in there. Because I have seen some people talk about him, like the late breakout stuff. If you have more analytic profile guys, maybe a little later you can grab him. But I think if you can get Rome at 109, 108, 107, that's a smash in terms of where the value is right now in terms of that. All right, Jeff, 107, where are you going?
Brock Bowers, and I think that we're stepping out of a tier after this pick, but Brock Bowers, I think, is on my board. I think we've seen this year, and it's kind of an interesting conversation about tight end because we've seen the production from Sam Laporta, we've seen Trey McBride, we've seen other rookies tight ends step up, and we've seen Travis Kelce really kind of fall off this year. And so I think coming into this year, the thought was, well, Travis Kelce's number one with a bullet. Kyle Pitts was a massive disappointment. What is the future of the tight end position? Now you feel a lot better about the future of the tight end position, but I think especially if you're in Superflex with tight end premium scoring, you can double up on tight ends, and I would not have any hesitation on, if you've already got Sam Laporta or Trey McBride, adding Brock Bowers and kind of doubling up and having both of those tight ends into your weekly lineup. You can get a major advantage, especially as you step up, because I play in tight end premium leagues that have 2 points per catch. And you can see, if you dig into there, like guys like Tyler Higbee outscore guys like Terry McBride or Terry McLaurin sometimes in those types of formats. And so just kind of make sure you know your league setting, because I think there's a real conversation, depending on how much it benefits tight ends, to push him even higher than this.
I think landing spot is something to watch for with this pick, because you could run into a similar situation to what we have with Kyle Pitts, where Brock Bowers is a really good blocker and he is really good at setting edges in the run game. And so if a team drafts him and says, okay, we want you to do tight end things, we don't necessarily want to use you as a primary pass catching option, that's where I'll start to fade Brock a little bit. That said, Brock is one of the best tight end prospects to come out in a long time. We can say that about 2 positions, right? We can say that about Marv, really 3, because I can say that about Caleb, Marv, and Brock Bowers. So if one of the scenarios that I think I've seen a lot is going to the New York Jets and being the number 2 option in that passing attack with Garrett Wilson, that's something I really like. If Brock Bowers starts to fall into like the teens, there are a lot of different situations where I really like him. But I agree with everything Jeff said. There's really a case to be made that Brock Bowers is going to outperform some wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s on given weeks, and adding him to your roster gives you a positional strength, and that's what you're kind of looking for in your leagues.
In last year's class, so I wrote a lot of the guide for the tight ends, was loaded at the tight end position. This year's class at the tight end position isn't as loaded. So I think, when you're thinking of like, oh, I can just get a guy later, not so much in this class. So like, if you need a tight end, I think Bowers is the pick here. I do get Pitts vibes a little bit in terms of people are already talking about him as tight end 2 in Dynasty. And to me, like, I think we have to hold our horses there a little bit, because tight end 2 to me, I mean, that's an elite producer that you're looking for. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you're going and kind of doing that. But I like him. I think this is a good pick. I think if he falls in 107 in tight end premium, that's a smash pick. I think if you're looking at that, so that's pretty good value there. So that's pretty good. Jeff, any final thoughts on Bowers before we move on?
No, you got it.
All right, 108. I'm going to take my guy, Xavier Worthy out of Texas. I'm the only one that likes this guy, I feel like. But explosive, vertical speed, quick accelerator. Doesn't get the love that I think he deserves out there. I think that he gets a lot of crap for, things that maybe weren't in his control, maybe his role, his usage, the way they kind of used him in Texas. I think that he has the ability to just beat guys. And if you're looking at the way the NFL is going, he's the guy. He's the type of profile that you like from the receiver position. Slot guy that's able to kind of go outside just because he has that speed on the outside there. I think this is one of those cases where Xavier, I know he's a smaller wide receiver, but I think with the Tank Dell and these other guys, I don't think we have to worry about that as much. Xavier to me fits a lot of different schemes. I think he's a good route runner. I think he's got to improve his hands. I understand that. But he has game-changing speed. Imagine him getting in any of these offenses, the Shanahan tree out there. He's going to smash in those things. I'm still taking him in the first round. I know in some mocks I've seen him go in the second round. If you can get Xavier Ward in the second round, I don't know. My head's going to explode, because I think that if he fits, if he gets the day 2 capital like I expect, the round 2, maybe back in round 1, I will smash Xavier Worthy there. What's your opinions on Xavier, Jeff?
I like, one of the biggest things that I like that we've seen this year is his usage in kind of the shorter area of the field. They've used him a lot more there. They've used a Donnie Mitchell to kind of be that stretcher a little bit more. I mean, Worthy has that ability, but I think that an apt comparison in the Steve Sarkisian system would be Jameson Williams, the way that he was playing at Alabama. I think there are elements of the way they use Worthy in kind of get the ball in his hands, allow him to create. And I think that that's one of the biggest things I've personally seen him take a step forward this year. Whereas last year, I think in the past more, I probably would have thought him to be more of that Hollywood Brown type receiver that, is a little bit undersized, going to attack you down the field. But that coming up, and that's where that true value lies, especially in those PPR leagues. And I think we've seen, a guy like Tank Dell and throwing out size is not a thing to discuss anymore. To be honest, the way that Tank Dell produced, it's just the way that the NFL functions now with the ability to create in space. That kind of a lot of, I don't know. I hesitate to say that physicality is removed from the NFL, but maybe some of the violence is removed from the NFL and allows some of these smaller players to create a little bit more. I think the way tackling has changed. So there's a lot more wrapping tackling going on than striking tackling going on. And that's kind of factored into these smaller players as well.
One of my hot takes is that Xavier Worthy is my wide receiver 6 this year, but he would have been my wide receiver 1 last year. He would have been ahead of Jackson Smith-Njigba, who finished as my wide receiver 1, based on my grading scale, simply because I think there is a ton of value to how open he can get. I think that you're going to see him as a very clear separator. He's a guy that you're going to hear a lot about his hands and his ability to win contested catch situations. He doesn't need to. He's going to be super open. He's been beating NFL level corners at the college level for a while. So I'm very confident that Xavier Worthy is going to be, I think he's best as a number 2 option, probably, but a number 2 option in the modern NFL offense is often a wide receiver 1 for fantasy. So it's worth noting that you could be getting a wide receiver 1 here at 108. I think you'd be super happy with that.
Jeff, you just got that look. I never can quite tell. Well, all right, 109. So we got another wide receiver.
I'm excited to be talking about rookies.
One thing too that we got to mention. No running backs yet. We still got no running backs on the board here, and that's the kind of the narrative of the 24 class. We'll be diving more in the running backs as we go into this stuff. But yeah, so 109, Christian's not taking a running back. Where are you going?
Troy Franklin, wide receiver from Oregon. This is one of Kevin's guys. Kevin was the earliest I know on him. But I've adopted him as one of my guys as well. He's my wide receiver 4. One of those guys where you watch him play and you say, that's exactly what the NFL wants in a wide receiver right now. Incredibly fast. He has a throttle that allows him to win on a lot of different routes. He runs all of the routes already in that Oregon offense. He kind of is propped up Bo Nix's draft stock, I think, quite a bit. There's certainly some things that he needs to work on. I think that he struggles to get off press at times, but as he started to beat people deep, he saw press a lot less because, they were trying to give some cushion so that he didn't beat them deep. And so I think as teams kind of figured out, okay, this guy can do a lot more than he could last year. He became as dominant as I've seen from an Oregon wide receiver. I think he's going to be a first rounder. And I think his floor is top 50. You just don't get this size and speed, height and speed all the time. So I love him. I think he can be a wide receiver 1 for fantasy as well. It's just I have him 2 spots ahead of Xavier Worthy as well. So
I expect him to go top 20, to be honest. And I think you hit it exactly right. The way that his game progressed, I've seen some knocks on his size. I don't buy that. I don't know. Certain players, they don't look like what you think that they're going to look like. And Franklin, if you think he's a 180-pound guy, he doesn't look like a 180-pound guy on the football field, to be honest. He looks like he's the part of a primary receiver. It's kind of interesting as you get these wide receivers that might land more in the back round of the first round. I mean, if he's hooked to Patrick Mahomes or if he's hooked to Josh Allen, something like that, especially him, the way that he can win vertically, I think there's interesting scenarios here where he can recoup and gain a lot of value depending on his draft placement and landing spot.
So I did some research, boys, on this particular player, and I went through all the scouting things I've seen so far on Troy Franklin. So here are all the concerns, but generally speaking, here's the 3 biggest concerns. He can't play through contact. That is wrong. This dude this year can play through contact. He's been really well in contested catch situations. So they put contested catch they must not watch the Pac-12. It's probably too late for these guys that are scouting over on the East Coast, because contested catch-wise, he's been able to come through. I think his comebacks are excellent. Like his ability to kind of, manipulate defenders, come back to the ball. And then functional strength, which is, that's just saying I don't know what I'm writing about. He has strength. He's one of the strongest wide receivers in the Pac-12. And he's been able to perform every single season. Like the knocks on him are wrong if you're talking about his strength as playing through contact, because this dude's a dog, and I'm going to use that, and I'm going to put it on social media. He's a straight dog on that side. He is a very complete wide receiver. There's not a ton of stuff that I don't like about Troy Franklin. And he's just been dominant throughout, and he's been one of the most dominant Oregon wide receivers in their history of college football. Like, just the numbers say it. And so, if you get him in the back end, that's an excellent pick there. All right, Jeff, 110, where are you going?
We've talked about the timing of this show, and this could either look way early or way late, to be honest, by the time this thing gets aired. But Michael Penix, this feels like the right spot right now for Michael Penix. The performance coming off that semifinal game in the college football playoff, we started to hear. This is one of the key things, the early, and I'm a big believer in the early talk that you hear about prospects before you kind of that middle, the later to the draft talk starts to get a little bit more noise, and kind of guys are hoping that guys fall down. Early, I believe what you hear, and right now the early buzz out of Penix from NFL guys is very, very positive. And so I think that that's the performance that he put out in the college football semifinal, him going into now the final. I mean, if he lights up Michigan and wins the national championship, I think that that is a lot of momentum heading into the draft cycle. His deep ball, this is the prettiest deep ball I've ever seen in my entire life, to be honest with you. I just love it. I love it so much. The way that he just drops it into the bucket. There are a myriad of comps out there that are for them, but I don't think anybody has thrown a deep ball the way that it just drops from the sky right into the right place, the way that he throws the ball. He showed a little bit more of that athleticism, the ability. We've talked on Drake Maye, functional athleticism. He's not going to be a rusher at the NFL level, but he does have the ability to scramble, to get out of the pocket, to get out of trouble. And I think that that's one of the things that he didn't use it at Washington. He didn't need to use it at Washington. The way their offense was structured, he didn't use it at Washington because they attacked vertically, because of the depth of the wide receivers that they had. Dylan Johnson at running back, the production there. They just didn't have that element in their offense. That doesn't mean it's not there. And he showed it quite a bit early at Indiana. He did have some injuries after that, but he did show it at flash again in the college semifinal. This feels like the right spot. Super flex, if he ends up being a top half of the first round of the NFL draft, he's probably pushing higher, and maybe he even makes that tier of 7 we talked about up to 8. But right now, not knowing what we don't know, this feels like the right comfortable spot.
Yeah. I worry a little bit about his ability to throw across the middle of the field. That's something I've noticed when charting, is that he avoids that area. And I think that the reason he avoids that area is because there's not a ton of anticipation in his throws. The scheme is doing a lot of the work. Now, I think you can say the same thing about Jayden Daniels. And so I think the scheme definitely did a lot of work for him there. So with that being said, if you get Michael Penix in a situation like one of the popular ones is the Vikings, if you get Kevin O'Connell scheming open Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, Michael Penix is probably going to perform like a top 12 quarterback, just being point blank about it. So I think this is the right spot. We'll see how he performs before this is aired, and see if Jeff looks crazy or not. That's my favorite part of this pick.
The thing with him is his knees are held together by multiple ligaments from other places. So will he pass the medicals? I think that he does have a good ball. He's an older prospect. Will he pass the medicals is the biggest concern if you're drafting him. I mean, if he's going to get first round capital, that's where I land with him, because he does play in an NFL offense. Coach DeBoer out there, Washington, they run an NFL scheme. Everybody talks about it. They run an NFL passing scheme. So you don't have to worry about kind of that gimmicky stuff like a Tennessee and these other places like that. 111, I'm going to take the first running back off the board. I'm going to take TreVeyon Henderson from Ohio State. We have no idea if he's coming out or not. We don't know. I'm just hoping that he does. I still am going to stand by. I think he can be a complete three down back of this class if he comes out. I think if he does come out, I think that if he finds a good landing spot, he will get drafted in the first round. If not, I wonder how many running backs can get drafted in the first round of these rookie mocks as we go, or these drafts as we go through. But I'll take TreVeyon Henderson there. And then, Christian, why don't you take us out with the 112, who you're going to grab there?
Brian Thomas Jr., 6'4" fluid athlete from LSU. Malik Nabers gets all the talk, rightfully so, but Brian Thomas Jr. had an incredible year as well. I think he can win at all three levels. I think that when I flip on the film, it's not a profile that I tend to gravitate towards anymore. I like the smaller, shiftier guys. Brian Thomas Jr. has a little bit of shiftiness in his game, and I do think that he certainly has some room to grow as a route runner. I think that there's certainly some things you can poke holes into his game, but Brian Thomas Jr. looks like a top 20 pick again to me. This wide receiver class is loaded. I don't want anyone to think that we're just loading up on wide receivers, overhyping them. There are still guys that we'll draft in the second round that I think can be high-end fantasy performers. So Brian Thomas Jr. here to round out the first round.
All right, let me run through all the picks so you guys know where you're at. 101, Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC. 102, Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver out of Ohio State. 103 is Jayden Daniels, quarterback out of LSU. 104 is Drake Maye, quarterback from North Carolina. 105 is Malik Nabers, wide receiver from LSU. 106, Odunze, wide receiver from Washington. 107 is Brock Powers, tight end from Georgia. Tier break, that's kind of where we had our tier there. 108, Xavier Worthy from Texas, wide receiver. 109 is Troy Franklin, wide receiver from Oregon. 110, Michael Penix Jr., quarterback from Washington. 111 is TreVeyon Henderson, running back from Ohio State. And then 112 is Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver out of LSU.
Yep. And we are going to move over to the podcast, do the second round of this rookie mock. So if you are interested in hearing the rest of it, where the running backs land, if we draft any more tight ends, you never know. You can find the full version over on the podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Just search up the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, and we'll be over there. Make sure you subscribe if you do as well.